Hospitals have a strange way of holding on to emotions. The laughter of newborns, the silent prayers of families in waiting rooms, and the final gasps of those who never walked back out, walls remember. When nurse Eliza Carter was told she'd be covering an overnight shift in St. Dymphna's hospital, she didn't think twice. She had floated between departments countless times before. But when her supervisor lowered her voice and said, "You'll be stationed in the grief ward tonight," Eliza felt her chest tighten. The grief ward wasn't a real department anymore. Not officially. It had been sealed off since the late 1970s, after a wave of unexplained patient deaths. Whispers among staff claimed it wasn't just a name. It was a curse. Over the years, nurses told stories of lights flickering in the abandoned hall, of voices calling their names from behind locked doors, of wheelchairs rolling down empty corridors when no one was inside. Most chalked it up to hospital legend. Eliza wasn't a believer in ghost stories. She believed in vitals, lab results, charts, the things she could measure. And yet, as she was handed the keycard that would grant her access to the long-forgotten wing, her hands trembled ever so slightly. The ward itself had been closed to patients for decades, but the hospital used it to house older equipment, monitors, beds, oxygen tanks, machines that smelled of dust and time. The night's assignment was simple: inventory. She was to log the remaining items, check that nothing had been stolen or damaged, and sit tight until morning. The elevator doors groaned as they opened onto the 4th floor. A faded plaque still hung above the entrance: Ward C, Palliative Care. Locals never called it that. They had another name: the Grief Ward. Eliza swiped her keycard. The lock buzzed with a reluctant click. As she pushed the heavy doors open, stale air rushed out, carrying with it the faint scent of bleach mixed with something sour, like wilted flowers left too long in. Water. The corridor stretched ahead, dimly lit by aging fluorescent bulbs that flickered every few seconds. The walls were a sickly yellow, peeling in strips. Wheelchairs sat abandoned at odd angles, as though their occupants had simply stood up and walked away mid-ride. Eliza pulled her cart of supplies in, the squeak of its wheels echoing far louder than she expected. The door closed behind her with a thud that made her flinch. For a moment, the silence pressed in like a weight. Shaking it off, she began her work. Room by room, she noted down ancient monitors and broken IV stands. Dust clung to her shoes, and the smell of mildew grew stronger the deeper she went. She told herself it was just another wing, just another night. But then, as she entered room 12, something caught her eye. One of the old patient monitors, thick, boxy, the kind used decades ago, was powered on. That wasn't possible. The cord dangled loose, unplugged from any outlet. Yet the screen glowed faint green, a steady heartbeat line moving across it. Eliza froze. Her training told her to check the device. Her instincts told her to leave it the hell alone. She stepped closer. The screen flickered, and for a moment she saw not just the heartbeat, but a patient ID. Name: Margaret Hensley, age 72. Diagnosis: respiratory failure. Status: admitted, 1974. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. That was over 50 years ago. And then the sound came. A faint rasp, like someone struggling to breathe, filling the silent room. The monitor's speakers weren't supposed to work anymore, but the sound was coming through them clearly. Eliza's hands shook as she reached out, intending to switch the machine off. But before she could, the heartbeat spiked. The patient ID flickered, and then the screen displayed 2 words that should have been impossible: "Help me." The words lingered on the screen like a demand. Like the machine wasn't just replaying something old, it was communicating. Her first instinct was to back away. But her training kicked in. Hospitals were full of malfunctions. Old monitors could glitch, scrap code could display nonsense. That's what she told herself. And yet the sound, that desperate wheeze, it had weight. It wasn't some tinny recording. It had the ragged cadence of real lungs failing, of a body desperate to cling to life. She pressed the monitor's power button. Nothing. The green glow held steady. She yanked the cord, already dangling uselessly. Still the screen refused to die. Then, with a sharp pop, the screen went black. The rasping stopped. The silence that followed seemed even heavier than before. Eliza exhaled shakily, realizing she'd been holding her breath. She scribbled a quick note in her logbook, room 12, monitor still active, possible electrical short, needs disposal. She didn't write the rest. No one would believe it anyway. Further down the hall, she reached a storage alcove where stacks of file boxes leaned against the wall. The labels were faded, but one box caught her attention. Ward C, patient records, 1970 to 1975. Something in her gut told her not to open it, but curiosity, it was stronger than fear. Inside were thick manila folders, each with a name written across the top. She pulled one out at random, Hensley Margaret. Her stomach lurched. The same name from the monitor. She flipped it open. The notes were written in the careful script of long-retired doctors. Respiratory complications. Decline over several months. Final notation, expired, July 18, 1974. Expired, dead, over 50 years ago. Yet her vitals, her heartbeat, had appeared right here tonight. Eliza shoved the file back and grabbed another, Caldwell Thomas, age 9. Cause of death, complications from pneumonia. Expired, 1972. Another, Mendez Raul, a construction worker. A fall, internal bleeding. Expired, 1973. Folder after folder. Every patient listed had died in the grief ward. Every one of them had been assigned to room 12, room 14, room 18. All the rooms Eliza still had. She tried to check. She tried to tell herself it was coincidence. But when she rolled her cart forward, passing room 14, she stopped cold. The glow of another monitor pulsed faintly in the dark. Her hands tightened on the cart's handle until her knuckles ached. She should report this. She should leave. But some pull, curiosity, dread, duty, drew her inside. The machine hummed faintly, though it had no right to be powered. The screen displayed another patient ID, Caldwell Thomas. Age 9. Status admitted, 1972. The heartbeat blipped faintly across the screen. And then, a sound no nurse could mistake, the thin, shaky voice of a child. "Hello? Is somebody there?" Eliza staggered back, her heel catching on a loose tile. The voice was coming from the monitor, tiny, scared, impossibly alive. Her throat worked, dry as sand. Against every instinct, she whispered, "Thomas?" The speakers crackled. Then came a cough, wet and rattling. "It hurts. I can't breathe." The monitor beeped faster. The heart rate spiked, and then the boy's voice rose into a scream, high, terrified, breaking into static. The screen went black. Eliza's own breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. She clutched the door frame like it was the only solid thing in the world. For the first time that night, she truly believed the whispers. The grief ward wasn't empty. It was waiting. Eliza forced herself down the corridor, but her steps were shaky, uneven. Her brain screamed at her to turn around, to abandon the logbook, the supply cart, the assignment. But nurses weren't allowed to panic. They stayed calm in codes, in chaos, in blood. This was different. She stopped at the nurses' station in the middle of the wing, a half-circle desk with a cracked countertop layered in dust. The old intercom system sat there, wires frayed, its microphone tilted like a head drooping in sleep. A faint hum vibrated from the speaker above. That shouldn't have power either. She reached out, hesitated, and tapped the mic. It screeched to life. With a piercing whine, Eliza ripped her hand back. Then, a voice whispered through the speaker, so faint she almost thought she imagined it. "Nurse!" Her body went rigid. The voice wasn't a child this time, it was deeper, male, hoarse, like vocal cords frayed from screaming. "Who's there?" she whispered before she could stop herself. For a long moment, nothing, then static, then words, "We're still waiting for our medicine." The intercom clicked dead. Eliza's hands trembled as she reached for the patient records box again. She pulled another folder, scanning desperately. Mendez, Raul. The notes mentioned internal injury, severe pain. The last entry, patient requested additional morphine. Request denied, already at max safe dosage. Patient expired shortly after. Her stomach twisted. "We're still waiting for our medicine." She dropped the folder, backing away. Her cart rattled as it bumped against the wall. She wanted to run, but something gnawed at her. If the patients were appearing on the monitors, if they were speaking through the intercom, then what else could they do? What if they weren't confined to machines? Her question was answered in room 18. The door was half open, creaking softly with the draught. She pushed it with one finger, the stale air heavy inside. The room was darker than the others. No monitor glowed, just shadows, then movement. For a heartbeat, she thought it was just her reflection in the room's observation glass. But no. Behind the glass, where no one had stood for decades, a figure leaned against the bed. An old man, skin pale, translucent, hospital gown hanging loose on bones. His chest rose and fell shallowly, each breath a struggle, his eyes, clouded grey, lifted to meet hers. Eliza's legs nearly gave out. He didn't move like a ghost. He moved like someone trying to stay alive. Each breath seemed to tether him to the room. His lips parted, cracking, dry. Water. The word was little more than a wheeze fogging the glass. Eliza stumbled back. Into the hall, her shoulder slamming against the wall. She squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them again, the room was empty, the bed bare. But the observation glass still bore a faint handprint pressed against the inside. Eliza's breath hitched, panic clawing at her throat. She needed to leave. Now, screw the assignment, screw the inventory. She turned to head back down the hall. And stopped. Every monitor on the floor had come alive. One by one, through open doors, green glows flickered on. EKG lines stuttered across the screens. Patient IDs filled each display, the names she had just read in the files. The dead, and from each room faint voices rose, moaning, begging, pleading, a chorus of suffering that hadn't ended in 1974 but had been trapped here, waiting, starving for someone to hear. Eliza clamped her hands over her ears, but it didn't help. The walls themselves seemed to carry the sound. And then the intercom at the nurses' station clicked on again. One voice, deep and final, spoke above the rest. "You've come back to care for us, nurse. Don't leave. Not yet." Eliza bolted for the double doors at the ward's entrance. Her shoes squealed against the linoleum, echoing over the chorus of cries. She slammed her keycard into the reader. Green light, quick beep, then shoved. The doors didn't budge. She tried again, harder. Nothing. As though the metal had fused to the frame. Her breath came in sharp, panicked bursts. She tugged, shoved, kicked. But the doors remained locked. Behind her, voices rose. Rasps, moans, coughs, the sound of hundreds of failing bodies demanding attention. Then, as if mocking her, the intercom crackled again. "Nurse, where are you going?" Eliza spun, pressing her back to the door. Her eyes darted down the long corridor. The green glow from the monitors pulsed in rhythm now, not random, not chaotic, like a heartbeat. The ward itself was alive. She told herself she needed a plan. Oxygen tanks, crash carts, Sharps containers, the wing still. Had equipment. She wasn't helpless. She was a nurse. She dealt with emergencies. Her hands shook as she gripped her flashlight and moved cautiously toward the nearest supply room. As she passed room 14, her peripheral vision betrayed her. She swore she saw a shadow moving inside. Against her better judgment, she turned her head. Thomas Caldwell. The boy sat upright in the bed, his hospital gown hanging loose on frail shoulders. His lips were cracked, his skin pale and waxy. His eyes, too large, too hollow, locked on hers. "I waited," he rasped. His voice was faint, but the words were clear. "You never came." Eliza's heart nearly stopped. She stepped back, shaking her head. "You're not real." Thomas's face twisted, not with anger but with hurt. It hurt so much, his chest began to hitch, his body convulsing as though he was drowning on dry land. The monitor beside him beeped wildly, flatlined, then spiked again. And then he vanished. The bed was empty, but his sobs echoed down the hall. Eliza stumbled into the supply room, slamming the door shut behind her. She leaned against it, chest heaving, trying to silence the terror clawing at her insides. The room was cluttered with boxes of gauze, broken monitors stacked against the wall, jars of cloudy liquid. She grabbed the heaviest thing she could find, a metal four-pole, and gripped it like a weapon. That's when she noticed the window. Small, square, set into the door. A face was staring through it, gaunt, hollow-eyed, skin stretched thin like parchment. A man's face, lips pressed against the glass, whispering words she couldn't hear. His hands smeared across the pane, leaving streaks that weren't quite blood, weren't quite condensation, something darker. Eliza stumbled backward into a stack of boxes, knocking them over. Supplies crashed to the floor. The face lingered, watching her, then gone. The glass was clear again. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't leave. The realization hit her like ice water. She was trapped inside. The grief ward, surrounded by patients who shouldn't exist, each one begging for relief that never came. The intercom clicked on again, louder now. The static building like a storm. Dozens of voices overlapped, whispering, pleading, crying. And beneath them all, that same commanding tone she had heard before, cold and absolute. "You are one nurse. We are many patients. It's time you begin your rounds." Eliza's grip on the four-pole tightened until her knuckles burned. She wanted to scream, but the voices smothered her throat. They weren't whispers anymore. They were instructions. "Room 12 first. She needs you. No, the boy. Go to the boy. We're dying. We've been dying for so long." The overlapping cries rose and fell like the tide, pulling her down the corridor against her will. She stopped at room 12. Margaret Hensley's room. The air inside was frigid, her breath puffing in pale clouds. The old woman lay on the bed now, skin grey-blue, chest rattling with every breath. The monitor beeped with agonizing slowness, each tone a countdown. Her eyes snapped open, clouded, wet, locked onto Eliza's. "Nurse," she croaked, her voice bubbling with phlegm. "You forgot. My treatment." Eliza shook her head violently. "I can't. You're not real. None of this is real." The old woman's hand shot out, brittle fingers curling around Eliza's wrist. Despite their withered look, the grip was iron strong. "Help me!" she screamed, the word gurgling, spitting, filling the room like an alarm. The monitor flatlined in a piercing drone. Eliza yanked free, stumbling backward into the hall. Her wrist throbbed where the fingers had dug in, and when she looked she saw the marks. Red, bruised fingerprints. "They can touch me." She staggered past the next few rooms, refusing to look inside. But each one called to her, a child's cough, a man's groan of pain, a woman whispering a prayer. The intercom flared again, harsh and metallic. "You left us once. You won't leave us again." Her head snapped up. That voice, lower, darker. It didn't sound like a patient. It sounded like something else. Something that commanded the ward. She pressed herself against the wall, IV pole raised, and shouted, "What do you want from me?" The reply came from every speaker, every monitor, every vent. "Rounds, nurse, until every patient is at peace." A sound yanked her attention to room 14. A child's cry, weak, broken, Thomas Caldwell. The boy lay in bed, lips pale, chest heaving. The monitor beeped steadily at his side. His eyes rolled toward her. "You didn't come back," he whispered. Eliza's hands shook violently. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He coughed hard, body jerking, and the monitor spiked. "It hurts, nurse. Please, make it stop." The intercom clicked, adding its demand. "Administer treatment." Eliza's stomach turned. She looked at the supply cart abandoned in the hall. Rusted needles, empty morphine vials, expired oxygen tanks. Nothing that could save anyone. "Do IT?" the voices roared, rattling the lights overhead. Eliza dropped the IV pole and ran. Darkness swallowed everything. For a heartbeat, Eliza thought she'd blacked out, but no, the hall was still there. She could feel the cold tile beneath her shoes, smell the rot in the air. Only the lights were gone, leaving her in absolute black. The flatline drone faded, and in its place, silence. Then, one by one, the monitors lit up again. Not green this time, white, blinding white rectangles glowing from every open doorway, flooding the corridor like lanterns. Each screen showed the same thing, Eliza, not as she was now, but how she would look if she stayed, her face pale, her eyes cloudy. Her body stretched on a bed, chest rising shallowly. An endless patient. She staggered backward. No, that's not me. That's not me." The intercom clicked on, softer than before, almost soothing. Every nurse becomes a patient eventually. The air thickened. Her lungs resisted her, as though invisible hands pressed against her chest. She clawed. At her throat, gasping, each breath harder to drag in. The monitors kept showing her, dozens of versions, each weaker, each closer to flatlining. Her knees buckled. She dropped the four-pole, the clang echoing like a death knell. Hands closed around her arms. Cold, dozens of them, patients forming a wall of pale bodies, their touch firm, unrelenting. They didn't attack, they guided. They laid her gently across a bed in the nearest room. The sheets smelled of mildew. The pillow cradled her head. She thrashed weakly, but her limbs felt like lead. Margaret Hensley leaned over her, cloudy eyes kind now. "Rest, nurse, your rounds are finished." The monitor beside the bed flickered. Her name appeared. Carter Eliza, age 29. Diagnosis, respiratory failure. Status admitted. The line beeped steadily at first, slower, slower. Eliza's vision narrowed. The last thing she saw was the screen as it shifted, letters scrawling across it like handwriting from nowhere, "Welcome to the grief ward." The monitor flatlined. And in the morning, when the day shift nurses unlocked the sealed doors, they found the wing exactly as it had always been. Dusty, abandoned, lifeless. Except for one monitor, faintly glowing in room 12. It displayed a new patient file. Carter Eliza, status ongoing.